Storytime about the toxic boy that I almost started dating. So a little background information. Him and I both met on a set of a movie that we were in. Well, a few days into filming, he asked me out. So of course I said yes. And it was literally the most amazing first date ever. So he asked for a second date and I said yes, of course. And the second date was terrible. He literally just tried to get in my pants the whole time. So then he asked me for a third date. And for some reason I said yes, hoping that it was not anything like the second date. And he didn't show up. So I pretty much got stood up. And then he even blocked my number. So a few months go by and I end up moving in with my best friend. About an hour away from where I was living when I met him. Well, the one night she came home and told me that he had messaged her on Instagram. Which I thought was funny as hell because my best friend did not swing that way. So she pretends to flirt with him and asks him to come over. So he drives an hour to our apartment and when he walks in, he just sees me standing in the kitchen. He immediately walked out. Storytime about how I was dating the school shooter. Yeah. So a little background information. I was a sophomore whenever this all happened. And it was around October. Well, the one day I was sitting at lunch with my group of friends. We're all sitting there having a good time when one of my friends dares me to go over and sit with this one kid. And he was sitting alone. He was kind of shy. And of course I did because they had offered me $10, guys. Can't beat that. So I go over there, we start talking, and I realize that he's actually really nice. And he's really hot. I never really saw what he looked like because he was always wearing hoodies during school. Anyways, we started hanging out more and eventually he said that he liked me and we started dating. The relationship seemed pretty perfect. Well, 6 months in, I think he started to trust me more. Because he had told me about this one group of girls that he absolutely hated. This group of girls just happened to be my friends. I didn't tell him that I was friends with these girls because they were considered controversial. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I was dating the school shooter. Like I said, I had never told him that I was friends with these girls because they were controversial. But he would go on for hours about how much he hated these girls. He went as far to say that he wanted to kill them. I didn't think anything of it at first because him and I had more of a sarcastic sense of humor. But he started to sound more and more serious every time that he would talk about it. Well, after us dating for 10 months, he calls me the one night and he starts telling me about how he's going to shoot up the school. He had told me his entire plan of how he was going to do this. Now, he must have thought that we were like ride or die relationship, when in reality, I was recording everything that he was saying. After we got off the phone, I wrote an email to all of the office staff in my school, but I fell asleep and never finished the email. I woke up the next morning, finished it. I had texted my friends not to go to school that day. I had already missed the bus. I rode my bike to school that day. I ran to the principal's office, nobody was there, and that's whenever I heard shots in the hallway. Storytime about how I was groomed for almost 2 years and didn't even know it. So a little background information. When I was 15, my house burnt down, and I went into a little bit of a depression. So after losing everything, my 6 siblings and I had to move into a 3-bedroom place with my grandparents. And a month or so later, I was looking for friends. Someone to talk to or pretty much anything that would just make me feel better. Well, this guy messaged me, and he said, "You're pretty as shit." And I'm 15, so a bitch was excited. Well, 2 weeks later, I asked my mom if I could go over my friend Samantha's. And of course she said yes, because I had stayed with Samantha a lot during this time. Also because there was barely room for any of us in this 3-bedroom house. So a little background information on my parents. My mom had been a police officer for 12 years. Sadly, she had to retire because of a neck surgery. My ex-stepdad was and still is a police officer today. Anyway, so my mom asked for pictures whenever I went over Samantha's to make sure I was really there. Like for part 2.
This is why you should never leave your house unlocked. Part 2. I explained the situation to the 911 operator and she told me that police were on their way. I stood there rooted to the spot and not long after my parents got home. The police arrived shortly after and told us that thieves usually wait until homeowners leave, check the door, and if it's unlocked they go in and take valuables. They checked the house but found no one. They said whoever it was probably left when they heard that someone was home. They told us to make sure that we lock the doors but not to worry too much. Not long after it happened, I told the story to one of my friends, and he said, "You only heard the door once. That means they were most likely already in the house. You just heard them leave."
Can you solve this mystery? This is the story about the murder of a group of kids that went to the same school. But things are not as simple as they seem. Someone is hiding something, and all the clues to what really happened are hidden in what I'm about to say. After the tragic murders of these boys, they had to each be buried in closed caskets because their bodies were so badly beaten. But someone noticed something strange at the funeral. He was a friend of one of the boys' parents, and he saw an elderly woman sitting alone, someone that he didn't recognize. When the funeral was over, she quietly went over to each headstone with a smile and placed a clover next to each one. Then she said a silent prayer. He thought she must be one of the dead boys' grandmas. He asked her, "Why did you place a clover on their graves?" She replied, "It's a happy flower. It brings good luck. You see, my grandson died too, but it was a different incident. He was bullied for a long time, and one day he couldn't take it anymore. He hung himself in the school bathroom." The elderly woman began crying and left. He felt bad for her, but something felt off. That night, he decided to Google what clovers mean. It said that they were the symbol for revenge. What really happened here?
I have a movie idea. Hear me out. After a long day of work in a very big city, two strangers had the same idea. Find some random bar and get a drink. The guy is tall, dark, and handsome. And the woman is beautiful, confident, and mysterious. No wonder they caught each other's eye. He buys her a few drinks. She plays hard to get. The classic rom-com scenario. Clearly they want each other, but not in the way that you think. There's just one minor little detail that they both share in common that they don't know about each other yet. And that is that they're both serial killers. He is the ideal target for her, and she is the ideal target for him. The guy usually waits till the woman falls in love with him before he kills her. And the girl does the same thing. So what happens when two serial killers start dating? Will they ever find out about each other? Will they try to kill each other at the same time? Does one of them get caught? Or do they fall in love and never kill again?
These strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. Today we have Arkansas. On August 23rd, 1987, Kevin Ives and Don Henry both went hunting together in a wooded area. They were near some train tracks, which was also very close to Don's house in Bryant, Arkansas. A train was making its usual night run to Little Rock when the engineer noticed something very strange. There were two boys lying on the train tracks, but despite all of the honking, they wouldn't get up or even move a muscle, and so he tried to emergency brake, but it didn't work and he ended up hitting them and killing them. A medical examiner determined that they were really high and they had smoked about 20 joints. But when both of these boys' families were told that, they didn't believe it. When they were killed, they were covered in light green tarp with Don's rifle next to them on the ground. Don's family said that he would have never left his rifle on the ground to get scratched, and that no matter how high they were, they would have woken up to all of the honking and the noise. Kevin's family hired a private investigator, and every time he would try to talk to the cops, they'd be so unwilling and resistant to talk to him. A different autopsy was conducted, and it turns out they only smoked 1 to 3 joints, and they were dead before they were even hit.
Storytime about a catfish that went way too far. My coworker Ron was always looking for girls way above his league on dating apps and social media. If the girl didn't look like a supermodel, he wasn't interested. He would always complain that the girls he liked would never respond. To make matters worse, Ron isn't the best looking guy in the world and he'd been out of the dating scene for a few years. We told him to lower his standards and be more realistic, but he wouldn't budge. One of my other coworkers named Jason decided to give him what he wanted and made a fake Facebook profile pretending to be a beautiful girl named Bella. He set her location to Canada and messaged Ron. Ron took the bait and they began messaging back and forth for months. He would always talk about Bella and how he couldn't wait to go to Canada to meet her. He was looking at plane tickets and talking about how he's been saving up for this trip. I was starting to think that this joke was going too far, but I hadn't seen anything yet. Ron came to work one day distraught and said that Bella had gotten into a terrible car accident and is in a coma that she wasn't expected to come out of. He said Bella's sister messaged him last night and told him the news. I figured Jason must have gotten bored of catfishing Ron and this was his way of killing Bella off and being done with it. Little did I know that Jason had no intention of stopping anytime soon and this was just the beginning.
Storytime de la trágica experiencia que fue perder mi virginidad. Bueno, ese día en la mañana tenía planeado ir a la casa de mis abuelos. Sabiendo eso, yo llamé a mi amiga y la invité a una pijamada, ya que mis padres no me dejan tener pijamadas. Bueno, listo, todo se dio y mi amiga llegó a mi casa. Durante el día pues hablamos, hicimos cosas, nada especial. Pero cuando llegó la noche fue cuando empezó todo. Tengan en cuenta que tengo prohibido estar con esa amiga. Éramos así de locas cuando estamos juntas. La casa de mis abuelos es de 2 pisos y el cuarto donde yo me quedaba es en el 2º piso. Y el cuarto tiene una ventana con una escalera conectada. ¿Por qué? No sé, no me pregunten. Mi amiga y yo decidimos invitar a 2 chicos que iban a nuestra escuela. Pasó como 20 minutos y llegaron los chicos. Era uno para mí, uno para ella. Y ellos entraron al cuarto con esa escalera. Entonces mis abuelos no tenían ni idea. Cuando entraron pues nos pusimos a hablar normal. Y de repente mi amiga y su chico se durmieron. Y nos quedamos solamente el mío y yo. Nos empezamos a acercar y la ropa se quitó. Like para parte de...
Part 2 about why I beat up my best friend. So like I said, I learned how to do my hair and makeup, and she went on vacation for like a month straight. Well, when she came home, she threw another party, and she was like, don't worry, after I'm done getting ready, I'll do your makeup and do your hair. And I was like, no, it's fine, I got it. She literally looks at me and she goes, are you sure? You don't really know how to do that. Like, it'll probably look really bad. And I'm like, why the fuck would you say that? She goes,
whenever they are buzzing with you, there can be a bit time after all the shit that we have been through. I was a mess at times, then took all parts and made them collide until the right ones fell into line to get something